Speaking of men who need no introduction, ladies and gentlemen, Homer Hinchcliffe.
Yay, Homer! I guess the story starts in about 1965. I graduated from high school, getting ready to go to college. I told my brother I was going to get either a 55 Chevy or a 57 Chevy. And my older brother said, "No, you want a Studebaker." And I said, "A Studebaker? Are they cool?" He said, "Yeah, they're real cool. They run them at the Bonneville Salt Flats." And he ran up and got an article called "The Ultimate Hot Rod." And it told about putting a Chevy 327 and a 53 Studebaker body and lowering it, putting a roll cage in it. And it showed some pictures of some of the Bonneville Studebakers. So he said, "I know where there's one at." So we went out by US 23 in Ypsilanti, and out behind this old gas station called the Checkerboard was a 53 Studebaker, $50.
Whoa.
So that was my first Studebaker. And then about 2 years later, across the street, less than 100 yards, I saw another 53 Studebaker. And so I asked them how much. They said $57. It was just $50, but we had $1 a day for each day of storage. So I bought that one too. The one Studebaker I had stored at I bought a friend's house, and he told me he had it towed to the junkyard. Well, what would be easier? Call me up and say, "Get your car out of here"? Well, I think what was easier for him is his friend said, "Hey, I'd like to buy that." Well, how much money do you give me for it? So that car disappeared. My other Studebaker was stored next to a barn in Ann Arbor, and a little kid playing with matches set the hay on fire. When the firemen got there, they knew they couldn't save the barn, but they said, "Let's get that Studebaker." And they were trying to rock it, get it out of there, and the snow was frozen the ground, and they had to back away. And I went out there thinking maybe it's just singed, maybe I can repaint it. And I looked around the corner, and it was about this tall off the ground. The mag wheels had melted. There were big puddles of aluminum. The fiberglass dash, it had a hog dash in it, and it was all just angel hair. So I just had to pay to have it towed away. And I thought, that's it. There's no more Studebakers. You know, they're all extinct. And my family had moved out to Arizona. My brother Bob said, "You know, I saw a black Studebaker like that one you used to have." And so I was out there visiting because I'm a school teacher. In the summertime, I got the summers off. And he's driving all around this neighborhood saying, "Maybe it's down this road, maybe it's down this road." And I'm thinking, it's a wild goose chase, we're never going to find it. And then we go over these railroad tracks, and there it is, a 53 Studebaker. And I asked the guy, "Will you sell it?" And he said, "I'm saving it for my daughter. She's 13. And every summer I'd go out and ask him, "Are you ready to sell it?" Well, I went out one summer and found out his daughter had it break down on her, and she said, "Get rid of that thing, it's old." So he sold it to me. I drove it back across country. I felt like Charles Lindbergh. I got a little toolbox with wheel bearings, anything spare water pump, spare universals, and drove it all the way back. I've done that 3 times now. I drove one back from California, a 55 coupe, and I also drove a 53 street machine out of Phoenix about 40 years ago. And last summer, my brothers towed it back to Phoenix. I gave it to one of my younger brothers. So the car went back to Phoenix, where it originally was from. But as far as Bonneville, my brother was a road racer. He road raced Trans Am Mustangs, and he built probably a dozen different cars over the years for himself and for other people. And he would always point out stuff. If we ever build a Bonneville Studebaker, we can use those connecting rods, we can use those pistons, we can use those heads. Which turned out not to be true, because once we actually got into it, he said, "We need this, we need that, we need Corello rods, we need a steel racing frame." So people say racing's the way to make a small fortune. You just got to start with a large fortune. But there was a guy in Belleville that had a 53 Studebaker coupe body, and I bought it. And started building a roll cage for it, and I'd work all night long on it because it was cooler at night. And being a school teacher, I had my summers off, and in the daytime I'd go have breakfast at Ipsy and then go lay down on the couch with the fan and sleep till about 4 or 5 o'clock, and then go out and start the routine over again. I used to open the bottom door while I was working on the Studebaker, and about 2 or 3 in the morning, this little baby skunk used to come in to check things out. I couldn't just say, "Get out of here!" So I had and when he got done kind of just looking around like, "What's going on in here?" he would leave. Luckily, I never got sprayed. But the modifications we ended up doing to the Studebaker was I modified the back end where I could mount a parachute. And I had a friend of mine say, reinforce the back end, because he's seen Studebakers where they pull the chute and it bends the bar in the back by the rear bumper. So I put an extra cap on that. We went with a full roll cage inside. The front end, my brother came up with this idea. He said, we'll put Corvette front spindles on it, which gives us a 5.5-inch drop. And on top of getting a 5.5-inch drop, he recommended putting spring buckets like they use on stock cars. And he says once we get off the trailer, we can take the hood off and get a big wrench, and 1/2-inch wrench, and lower it down right on the ground. So that's why if you look at some of these pictures, how low I've got it to the ground. I had a friend that I called that ran a Studebaker out there, and he said, well, my Studebaker's low. But then when he saw mine, he said, man, how'd you get that thing so low? You know, and I explained to him, we put Corvette front spindles on it, and we got spring buckets to where we can lower it down even more. And this picture, by the way, was one where there was a storm coming in. We just had this group shot for Hot Rod Magazine of all these Studebakers. There was probably 10 of them. And the storm was moving in, so I just turned around my camera and took a picture. It almost looked like I knew what I was doing. Because you got this sunburst here for Commander Cody. And I didn't realize what a neat picture it was until I had taken it and had it developed. And the reason I named the car Commander Cody, there's a story behind that too. I was working in the garage late one night and I heard a rocket go off on my TV, and I turned around and I thought, that's Commando Cody, who I used to watch as a kid when I was like in kindergarten out in California. So I went in and started taping it, and I came back out and started working on the car, and I thought, Commando Cody, Commander Cody. The V8's called the Commander. So a play on words, Commander Cody. You would not believe how many people come up and say, oh, Hot Rod Lincoln, Commander Cody and the Lost Planet Airmen. There's a group from Ann Arbor. It's gotten to where I just say, you know, rather than explain to them. Because one person, I went through the whole explanation, and he sat there like, huh? Another funny thing that happened was I was a shop teacher, and I had some pictures up in shop. And I had a kid one time go, Mr. Hinchcliffe, is that you? And I looked at him real straight faced and said, well, don't you recognize me? He got this look on his face, looked back at the picture, and looked back at me like, you gotta be kidding. But another story about this picture is I never saw it being taken. And I couldn't believe, you know, Ron Hall had it and gave it to me. And I was thinking, I don't remember anybody ever taking it. And it wasn't until about 2 years later I saw a video where I was running my car and I was looking at the instruments. That's why I didn't see it being taken out of that little window shot. But Ron Hall was a good friend. He was the first one to go 200 miles an hour in a Studebaker powered vehicle. So that's pretty neat. The reason I ran a Ford 351 Cleveland was my brother worked at Ford's for 43 years, and he road raced for over 30 years, and he knew about engine parts, he knew about suspensions, so he helped me with that. And we eventually got the car to Bonneville in 1990. And here we are, lining up. I told Ron Hall, let's go over to the warm-up area, and if I can get it in first, second, third, and fourth, we'll go line up and make our first run. And the only thing you're told to do on the first run is don't go over 150 miles an hour. So here I am. I've never been in a race car before. I got on my fire suit, my fire gloves, my fire boots, a fire sock, and a helmet. And the only thing you're told is don't go over 150. So I took off, and it was really neat. It felt like I was going a million miles an hour because I'd never been that fast. And I pull off, you know, pop the parachute, and I look in the rearview mirror, and you see the parachute jumping all around the salt. I pull off. Ron Hall pulls up. He was my push car. He was in his 53 Studebaker street machine. He pulls up and says, "Man, you're in trouble." I said, "What are you talking about?" He said, "You left the line without permission." I said, "You were pushing me." He said, "No, I wasn't." I said, "Well, then the clutch is dragging," because I had my foot all the way to the floor, and it turned out that's what it was. The linkage had broke, and the clutch was dragging. But he said, "They want you back to the starting line right now." And I said, "Shoot, I'm not going back to the starting line." I was afraid of going into town that night because there might be wanted posters. And the last thing I wanted to do was get on the bad side of the Southern California Timing Association, because I knew they were kind of an old-time good old boys network, and somebody from another state, you know, would screw up. And so on my next run, the only thing I was told to do is go between 150 and 175. And I got it up to near 175, and all of a sudden the car, it's like somebody else was driving it, like a ghost was driving it. And I told my brother, it's like the car's driving itself. And he said, "You got rear axle steer." I said, "Guys get killed with that all the time." Oh, great, you know. And luckily we added leaf springs to the car, and that took care of it for them. But later on we had to go to traction bars, because what was happening is we'd lowered the axle so much it was flexing back and forth on the leaf spring. So we had to add traction bars up on top. And we also had what's called a panhard bar that goes down off the frame and keeps the axle from shifting back and forth. But the 175 allowed me to go on the long course, which is the 5-mile course. The short course is the 3-mile course. The long course is the 5-mile course. So on the 5-mile course, I went 183 and was getting towed back. And one thing I was kind of mad about was they had made me put a horn on the car. And I'm thinking, a horn? This is a race car. You know, you're not going with other cars. Well, you don't need a horn. But that's stupid. But, you know, the rules said it, so I went ahead and put a horn on. Well, I was being towed back, and I realized they hadn't put the cover over the hood scoop, and the salt from my brother's truck was flying back and going in the scoop, and probably going in the carburetor. So I was able to hit the toggle switch, hit the horn, and point at the scoop, and they stopped and got out this foam rubber thing and blocked it off. So after that, I realized, well, maybe a horn isn't that bad of an idea, you know. And it's really neat because there's all different types of cars and stuff out there. We ended up on that first week going 191 miles an hour. Wow. And Ron Hall wrote in Turning Wheels that the Hinchcliffe brothers get Rookie of the Year honors for doing 191 their first time out. Well, 1991, I towed 1,800 miles out there. We went to warm up the motor. The throttle hung up, and it dropped the valve. Game over. And I told people that if I ever blew the motor, I was just going to drink lemonade and walk around and look at the car. I almost OD'd on lemonade that year. And I had a friend of mine that runs a Studebaker out there. Bruce Geisler, and I was wearing this big black cowboy hat. He came up to me, got right in my face, and said, "Homer, are you a badass with that black cowboy hat?" I looked at him like I was really mad and said, "I'm a badass with or without." And he acted like he had a nervous twitch and walked away like, "I don't even want to talk to you anymore." Bruce Geisler's been running a car since 1960. It's in the Peterson Museum now. Some of those group pictures I have is Bruce. Yeah, 219. Yeah. Bruce Geisler. But he's a fun character. And I called him and he gave me some advice on building the car. He said on the roll cage, put plates down, sandwich the floorboard with plates, because he's seen in severe crashes the body comes up on the roll cage and the driver gets crushed by his own seat belts and stuff. And the seat belts, they have belts that go around. There's some over there.
If you were showing.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Well, this is Bruce Geisler's Studebaker. I almost got in trouble because he had real nice T-shirts with this car on it and a picture of the state in the back, and I was going to wear it to school. And one day I was getting ready, and I started looking at it, and I started saying, "This isn't Utah, it's Nevada." And I got to looking at some of these towns that were highlighted. One of them said Rosie's Ranch, the Mustang Ranch, and the name of the car was the Hanky Panky Special. I'm glad I didn't go to my junior high wearing a shirt. I didn't catch it, but
What do you mean? You know what?
I almost got in trouble on that one. But the next year we came back and I made a run, and my brothers were coming to pick me up, and my one brother Bob had his hand out the window. He wasn't giving me the peace sign. He was saying they had heard on the radio that I'd gone 200 miles an hour for the first time.
Wow.
And that was my goal. But we kept running, and eventually I got up to 205, and I designed a hood scoop and a front air dam. Let me get this picture over. And I had a friend that's a fiberglass guy, Frank Morowski, and I said, "You make me this hood scoop, the cowl induction hood scoop, and you make me this front air dam, which the rules allow you to do, and you can do what you want with them." And so I go out there now, and half the other Studebakers have something that I designed, which is neat. I like that. So, but this is the way the car ended up looking, with the front air dam and the scoop. The worst run I ever had was one where they told me it was wet down by the 3 Mile. So I got down to near the 3 Mile, and I thought, okay, I better get going. So I floored it, and it was fishtailing, and then all of a sudden I'm getting sideways, and I'm like, whoa, 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 and I'm thinking, you've lost it. The car was completely sideways. So as I'm sliding sideways towards the 3 Mile marker, it goes around, and I'm looking down as I'm spinning and shutting off the ignition switch and the fuel switch. Because if you start flipping and get knocked out, your fire extinguisher system has to be activated manually. And so if I was knocked unconscious, you wouldn't be putting the fire out. And it spun around twice. Let me see how this went. Twice counterclockwise, and then twice clockwise.
Whoa.
And then they gave me a timing slip, and it said I did 160 through the 3 Mile timing marker backwards. So sometimes when I've given speeches, some of my friends that run Bonneville will see my car and they'll go, which way are you going in this picture? So, but the best I ever ran was 206, and that's what I call the Twilight Zone run, and it's also the run that makes me think my car should have been. I'm happy I got 200, but I'm pretty sure the car should have been about 20 miles an hour faster, because I had a run where the engine quit. I thought, I don't know if it's ignition or if it's gas. I started pulling off the course, and then it started sputtering. So I pulled back on the course, and I thought, well, I'll try to make a decent run out of it. So I was winding it up to $8 grand on the shifts and stuff. And at the first timing marker, normally I'm doing about 160. I was only doing 149. But going out the back door, the last speed they got was 206. So some of the people on our team were saying that this is impossible. And it just makes me think what the problem was. The fuel pressure we were running was 9 psi. And I've been told by my Camaro friends who have set a bunch of world records, 6 is as high as you want to go. You know, so we never did run the car with it at 6, which I think it should have been. And a friend of mine who's really knowledgeable, and he's in the 200 mile an hour club, he said the problem is, Homer, you fire the motor up, you warm it up, and it's dumping extra fuel into the carburetor, and he says you're wet fouling your plug. And he says the really bad part about it is the engine will still run, it just won't run at its full potential. So, but I had an engine builder one time tell me there's no reason your engine shouldn't get between 750 and 800 horsepower. It was a 351 Ford Cleveland with Robert Yates heads, titanium valves, Roush intake, an 830 Holly, a Weaver Brothers dry sump. So, but I'm glad I did it, but I've retired the car now because my brother that built the motor has passed away, and the 2 of my other brothers that were part of our team passed away. And also, I was going to run 2010. I had a mechanic that was going to go out there with me, and they called me and said, you no longer have this number. And I said, well, I had it in 2007. The numbers are good for 3 years. I called the number guy, and he says, did you make any runs in 2007? I said, yeah, I made 5 runs. 4 of them were over 200 miles an hour, and 1 of them was 206, fastest I've ever been. He said, well, this doesn't make sense. You should still have the number. So he calls up the guy that had my number, a 4-cylinder Vega that doesn't even run the same 5-mile course that I run. And he agreed, okay, I'll let him have 929 back. And I said, well, thank you, because I've had that number for 20 years. And so I get a letter 2 weeks later, and it said, Frank Sloan's decided he's not going to give the number up. You've got to go to 941. Well, I called him up, said, can I add a Roman numeral to it? Because I got 2 friends that run Bonneville that run Roman numerals next to their regular numbers. He goes, oh no, I don't like Roman numerals, they're too confusing. You know. And so I said, well, I'll tell you what, just forget it, I'll just retire the car, and I can keep the number I've had for 20 years. Every picture I've got is 929. And the reason it's 929 is my brother road raced for years with number 29. So when I first got my number, I called the number guy and said, is 29 available? And he said, no, 1 through 100 is not available. I said, is 229 available? He said, no. I said, is 929 available? He said, yes. You want 929? I said, yeah. But I think what's happened was they accidentally gave my number away, and they don't want to admit they made a mistake. Because on my entry for 2007, it had car 941. And the number they want me to change over to, out of all the numbers possible, is 941. So that tells me they made a mistake. But I'm glad I did it. I'm glad I've got the pictures. And my brother one time was telling somebody, you know, I like Studebakers and all, but with Homer, it's like a religion or something. So I've enjoyed it. And this summer, I just bought a 54 coupe, and I've been driving it to some of the car shows and meets and having fun with it. I found out it's kind of easier just to pay the money and get in, turn the key and wave to your friends. You know, so that's what I've done. Any questions?
Yeah. Well, great job. Homer, can you tell us a little bit about the classes? I know Bonneville's got many classes.
Well, the reason my car says C, G, it's C gas. Gas is a class, the class I'm running, you can't chop the top. Now some of these cars did have chopped tops.
Right.
Let me find one. They're running a different class. Like this one here, chopped top. This guy here is an airline pilot from Guam, and beaters on the island of Guam they call the Guam bombs. Well, his car is called the Guam bomb. Terry Hunt. This guy runs every year, and he's got my scoop and my front air dam on it. I was out there 2010, and he hollered over to some of the other guys. This is the guy that helps Studebakers go fast because he knows I designed those things. This has got a chop top. This is actually me next to the car. I let my brother drive it 2003 because my brother was a road racer for like over 30 years, and he said we ought to put a real race car driver in that car. Well, I've gone 206, he went 190. But he out-tricked himself. He thought we were going past the horsepower curve, so he said we're going to put a 275 gear in it. Well, he would shift into fourth gear and it'd fall down to 6 grand, and just wouldn't pull it. You know what I realize now, looking back, what he could have done? He probably could have kept it in third gear and gone over 200 miles an hour.
Wow.
Yeah.
Have you ever dealt with a gentleman from Vintage Air? He had
He's out of Texas.
with the air conditioning.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Jack Chisenhall.
Yeah.
There's a picture of it there in one of those jobs.
No, it's actually not Jack Chisenhall.
Okay.
It's somebody else. These guys, it's kind of a sad story. They ran a Studebaker, a red one, and they were working on it, and they gunned the motor, and it jumped into gear and slammed into reverse and went 2 blocks down the road and crashed.
Wow.
And they found another donor car, and they just really worked on it to get it done, and they were able to make Bonneville. But then the son, the driver, was riding a vintage motorcycle and somebody hit him. You know, that was it.
So they run gas classes and then also fuel classes?
Yeah, they've got a fuel car now called the Beast, and I talked to this guy and didn't know it was him. It was Les Liggett, a famous Hemi engine builder, and I told him my situation, my numbers. He said, what state are you from? I said, Michigan. He started laughing. He said, you're from the wrong state, boy. And I said, I know you're kind of joking, but it's kind of true. And he goes, I know it. But he told me he was going back to his roots, and he was building a Studebaker like he had in the 50. His son went 340 miles an hour. Wow. It's got 5,000 horsepower. You can look it up on the internet. Wow. It's black. It's called the Beast. And
the fastest too?
It's the fastest stock-bodied car in the world.
Really?
Studebaker was the first car to break 200 miles an hour, the body.
Yeah.
And right now, today, the fastest stock-bodied car is a 53 Studebaker.
Wow.
340.
Yeah.
What motors did you say?
A Chrysler Hemi.
Hemi.
And they detuned it down to 5,000 horsepower. Now that sounds like BS, but if you watch some of the drag racing on TV, some of these AA fuelers, they're claiming 10 and 12,000.
Right.
But they only have to run for 4 seconds.
Yeah, how long would a run be, time-wise?
I figured out once I get up to speed, I'm going through a mile in 17 seconds when you're at 200 miles an hour. But they had a car at Bonneville that's a streamliner, which is the ultimate, as long as this room. And it's got a turbine motor, and it had an exit speed of 503 miles an hour. And there's a guy from England that I shook hands with, and in a jet car at Black Rock, Nevada, he went 763 miles an hour and had a sonic boom. The ground looked like it had been plowed by a farmer with a plow from the sonic wave. And he's got the world land speed record. And I also shook hands with Chuck Yeager, who did it in the air. That's kind of neat.
What's the land speed?
The land speed record is 763 miles an hour for jet cars.
For piston cars, it's
Piston car,
400.
probably 460.
Yeah.
Probably the Speed Demon.
And what was the class record in C-gas?
C-gas was I think at the time I did it, 217.
So close.
Yeah, I figured out where it's like 4% or somewhere in there. You know. But originally I wasn't attempting to go after the world record because you got to have the right weather. You know, everything's got to be right. Just like last summer, everybody went to Bonneville and it was rained out. Everybody just had to go back. There's people coming in from Australia, all over. But it's a neat place, and there's some characters out there. I talked to an old guy on a motorcycle that had a Vincent Black Shadow, and I said, "What record are you going after?" And he said, "My own." He held the record. But I think he had done about 230 on a Vincent Black Shadow. And some of you may have heard this story. Back in about 1955, there was a guy on the Vincent Black Shadow named Raleigh Free, and he decided his leathers were slowing him down, so he got in his bathing suit and he laid down on the bike and put his legs out behind him, and he got 150, got the world record. And so another guy said, "Well, that's the way to go," and put on his bathing suit and crashed.
Oh no.
And they said he didn't die, but he probably wished he had him. Because sliding on salt.
Oh.
Wow.
Salt in the moon.
Yeah, rub the salt in the
Well
moon.
standing.
Wow.
But someday I'd like to go back to Bonneville and just look around.
Sure.
So, but I'm flying out to see my brothers in a few weeks out in Buckeye, Arizona, and there's a little hot rod shop I go to, and he's got the number with the Roman numerals on it. And every summer I ask him, "Have they complained about your numbers?" He goes, "Nope." But the guy told me, "I'm going to find out who's using those Roman numerals, and I'm going to put a stop to it." Well, I go out there in 2010, the posts are for Bonneville, the middle car, 766 Roman numeral 2. So if he's looking for it, there it is.
Yeah, thank you, Homer.
You're welcome.
That's wonderful.
Yeah.
Great job.
Has everyone seen these pictures before I put them away?
I want to make sure. Wouldn't mind keeping them out for a little bit.
Yeah.
You got him, Marty, right?
Don't you have the autographed ones for sale?
No.
What?
Do you have any like
I-
8x10s or
I could have some printed up. I've got one where I'm standing with my brothers,
Yeah, I saw that.
but we had a UFO problem like Joe Biden's having right now.
Oh yeah.
Will you look at that?
There it is.
Let me-
There's a UFO. But
My
he's still-
brother Sid, who's a
Wait,
model
I think
builder,
he gets it.
he took 2 moon discs and a stainless steel bowl, and he mounted little lights in it, and he's got this magic string that you can't see, and he took a picture of it, and he had his neighbor going crazy, you know, saying, were you around yesterday at about 4 o'clock? And he showed him the picture and saying, "The pictures don't lie," and the guy was just, "Holy cow!"
I love it. That's great.
But that picture looks so science fiction when you're wearing the suit and stuff that I figured I'd throw in a flying
Yeah.
saucer.
That's good. That's good. So, how many students are still running out there, would you say?
I'd say that there's even more because they passed the rule that says early 1900s to 1932, and then 1932 to 1981, and then on up. So Studebakers are going to be competitive forever. And I got a friend that years ago made a whole Studebaker body out of fiberglass. Now he's since let another guy take over, but Frank Borowski, he's been called a fiberglass wizard. He's good. But I'm happy that over in Ipsy I got a bunch of styrofoam and a butcher knife and a sander, and was putting Bondo on the styrofoam, kept sitting it on one of my street Studebakers, and got it,
Yep, how you wanted it.
And the front air dam, you pretty much knew, just go straight from the bumper down, and I got my race car and figured out how much off the ground you want it. And people buy all that stuff now.
Are you allowed to run a spoiler in the stock class?
No.
No spoiler.
But,
air dam.
but I'm glad you mentioned that. There is, let me get this big picture. There is an air dam that Bruce Geisler told me you got to get. 53 Studebakers, they cut through the wind well, but they say the back ends lift out because they're not a fastback. Well, there's an air vent on both sides. They go down in front of my rear axle.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
All the way through?
Yeah, all the way through. As a matter of fact, I've got a permanent scar on my right arm where I was welded underneath and a glove came down and burned through my clothing. I also had a deal where I was putting in my spring buckets, and I got a big screwdriver and wedged it in because I wanted the metal just right. And I tapped it with a hammer, and just one more tap, and that screwdriver kicked around and busted two of my teeth out. And my older brother just thought it was hilarious. But he also flew me off the barn in a homemade airplane in Alabama when I was in the second grade.
Second grade?
Was how many brothers did you have, and what?
There were
number?
7 of us.
And what number were you?
I was second. That's why.
Second oldest. Second
Yeah.
Oldest.
Yeah.
And Ed
That's
was
why
the-
my older brother never liked me. Because he was number 1 for 2.5 years. Then that damn little Homer came along.
You guys were all born military bases around the
Yeah.
world?
My father was a pilot in World War II.
Yeah.
And I got brothers born in Alaska. I got brothers born in Africa. I got a brother born in Smyrna, Tennessee. I was born in Montgomery, Alabama. 2 of my brothers were born in Lake Charles, Louisiana.
Wow, where were you born?
Montgomery, Alabama. And my Maxwell Air Force Base. And my youngest brother that I'm going to see was born out in Rudyard, Michigan. My brother Bob got in trouble in Phoenix because he got in a fight one night. He had been drinking. He got in a fight with a black policeman, and they finally got him into jail and locked the cage and got out a clipboard. Okay, what's your name? Robert Hinchcliffe. Where were you born? Africa. The guy threw the clipboard down and left the room. And he came back later on and said, "Okay, let's try this again. Where were you born?" I said, "Africa." The guy got real mad again. Another policeman came in and said, "What's all the noise about?" So I keep asking where he's born. He keeps saying Africa. He said, "Well, maybe he was. Colonel Hinchcliffe, where was your son Robert born?" "Africa."
Yeah. Was Ed your youngest brother?
No, Ed was my oldest.
Oh, he was your oldest. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
If you look up on the computer, Ed Hinchcliffe, it might be under Pete Hinchcliffe because his nickname was Pete. He road raced Trans Am for years.
Mustangs.
He was really talented.
Homer, your dad, did he fly fighters or bombers?
Bombers, B-24 bombers.
Excellent.
Yeah. He flew B-47 bombers too. Yeah.
How'd you get to Michigan?
We were stationed at Kinchlow Air Force Base in the Upper Peninsula. And then when my dad retired, he wanted to go back to truck driving, because that's what he did before he was in the military. But, with 7 boys, Crazy.
Any sisters?
No girls.
No girls. Wow. So how'd your mom handle that?
Truthfully,
Yeah.
she drank.
Perfect.